Thank you to our District 1 candidates, Red Browne and Phil Morgan. And thank you to our District 2 candidates, Todd, Donovan, and Amy Glasser, for being here with us today. I know how many forums and panels that you are asked to be on during election season, and we are all very appreciative here of your time with us, and we're all very excited to get to know you a little better. Many of you in the audience may know all of this, but I want to just root us in what our county council is responsible for. The Whatcom County Council is the legislative branch of Whatcom County government. It is comprised of 7 members. 1 member is elected from each of the 5 county council districts, and 2 are elected as countywide at-large representatives. And as you know, this is a special year for us because it is our first election with our 5 new districts that we voted in last year. So we do have our District 1 and 2 candidates with us. Just a little geography, in case you don't know, District 1 encompasses South Bellingham, with the northern boundary covering the Sunnyland and Puget neighborhoods, as well as the downtown core up to East Street, and going as far south as Lake Padden, and nearly down to Teddy Bear Cove on Chuckanut Drive. This was me looking at a map, so forgive my errors if I'm wrong, but that's about the gist of it. District 2 encompasses North Bellingham, extending up to Walmart on Meridian and containing the Birchwood neighborhood, the Barkley neighborhood, and reaching from Zwanich Park on the waterfront over to Blodell Donovan Park on Lake Whatcom. All county council positions are nonpartisan. The term of office for each is 4 years. And the county council exercises its legislative power by adoption and enactment of ordinances and resolutions, and responsibilities range from adopting plans for development of the county, creating land use rules, enacting public safety laws, levying taxes, appropriating revenue, adopting the county budget, and setting speed limits, no shooting zones, and animal control regulations. So our format today is the same as last time. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes for an opening statement. I will then go through some questions I've prepared. We will, of course, open to our audience. We will have 2 people roaming around looking for people with their hands up with questions. And when I ask the question, each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. We do have Maureen here to keep us on track. She will let you know when your time is up. She'll give you a 15-second warning. I think we have a bell today so you'll get the bell if you've gone over time. And so we can begin with opening statements from our District 1 candidates in alphabetical order. Let's hear first from Red Browne.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the City Club and all of you for hosting this and participating in democracy. I love the City Club. This is my 10th year as a member, and I was a former board member of the City Club. I'm originally from Australia. I came over originally to Canada for what was supposed to be 2 weeks. That turned into a year. I met and married my bride, Sheila. We just celebrated 29 years together, and I started a business in Vancouver, BC, and I opened an office in Blaine about the size of a washroom stall in 1990. In 1994, I moved down here with my family, and I built that business to 360 people spread across 5 countries. 140 of those jobs were in Whatcom County, and they were family wage jobs with benefits, 401k, and all the rest. I've been very involved and very interested in community service in the entire time I've been down here. I was recognised as the Business Person of the Year. I'm still a member of the Rotary Club. I was a former Ethics Commissioner for Whatcom County, member of the US Coast Guard Auxiliary on the Bridget Collins board. I'm currently the Vice Chair of the Whatcom County Council, finishing up my first term, and I look forward to serving on a second term. Thank you.
Thank you, Red. And our second candidate, please, Phil Morgan.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for inviting me. This is a real honor because I know you represent a wonderful cross-section of the community. My name, of course, is Phil Morgan, and I'm running for a seat on Whatcom County Council District 1. And I'm not running against anyone. I'm running for you. Also, I'm running for farmers and the refineries and the ability to build homes. I'm a veteran of the Korean War, and if you notice my signs, they are green and yellow. I support healthy economy. We need to keep also we need to attract living jobs and keep them. I've been a resident of Bellingham since 1970, coming to the city with my family of 6 to work as the chief electrical engineer at Mobil Oil Refinery, which is now Phillip 66. There, I supervised a crew of electricians and worked on capital projects and maintenance of critical refinery production systems. I served in the community, and I have been involved in many endeavors. I was former president of Whatcom County Citizens for Freedom. I've been involved in Boy Scouts and fundraisings for YMCA and United Fund. I have been a church elder and served on church boards. I run for office not for special interests, but to serve and listen to the people, and I appreciate your vote.
Thank you, Phil. And now for our District 2 candidates, again in alphabetical order. Todd Donovan first.
Thanks, Heather. I'm Todd Donovan. I'm running for re-election to County Council to continue working with our progressive majority. And I'm going to dispense with the usual openings to offer some of my concerns about democracy broadly. I'm worried about the future of democracy in our country. We're descending into a post-fact, anything-goes politics that makes governing nearly impossible. It's a realm where candidates offer false promises, fuel passion, and defy reason, and it works. We elected a president who did it this way, and this disturbs me. It's a politics of promising people something for nothing. It's like California's Prop 13 or Tim Eyman fighting against taxes. It's a politics of pandering, of promising feel-good solutions to complex problems, supporting claims with alternative facts found on the internet. It tears allies apart. It's attacking people you need to work with who share your values. It's burning bridges with people who share your values. It's wanting to win at any cost. It's creating expectations that can't be met, which beget even more cynicism. And even if you can win this way, you can't govern that way. And I want to ask everybody here, what happens when responsible people stay silent about that kind of politics? And I'm not just talking about Donald Trump.
Thank you, Todd. Amy
Thank you,
Glasser.
Heather. I want to thank everybody for being here today. As I was saying hi to some people at the tables, federally we have very little we can do at the moment, but locally that's where it's at. So thank you for being here and for voting. My husband, who is here with me today, and we've been together for 35 wonderful years, mostly. We spent our first 11 years in Custer, where we lived on wetlands, so I got to learn a lot about wetlands, land use, what you can and you can't do on land. Luckily, we were in a water association, so we didn't have to worry about water. We've now been in Bellingham for 3 years in the 2nd District near the hospital, of which we decided was smart as we got older. And so what we want to do is remain here in Bellingham for the rest of our lives. It's the best place to live. I chose to run when Bernie Sanders said, step up. I said, this is the end of my career. I'm getting close to retirement, and I want to make sure that the people that I have worked for 40 years, which are the underprivileged, the marginalized, the abused, the neglected, the homeless, that those people get a voice in county government. And I want to be that voice for those vulnerable people. I've had in the trenches work. I work out in the county where people are homeless, where people are destitute. It's not just Bellingham. I want to make sure that if you vote for me, you get my opponent, because he has 2 more years left on his term. So that's two liberals for the vote of 1. Vote for me, you get 2. If I lose, the concern is that next time, if I lose, then the council will appoint the replacement, and we don't know who that will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. So, as our candidates have stated, there are a lot of incredibly important local conversations going on. And as I mentioned last time, a local hero of mine says, just like some of you have said, that when the national politics seem to go awry, the best thing to do is to turn around and focus locally and figure out how to make our community strong. So before we get into some of those hot topics and conversations that we are all aware of, and I know that we're dying to talk about, I thought we could spend a little time just getting to know you. So my first question for you is, the issues may change, but your values are likely unchanging. So what would you say are your top 3 to 5 values that you measure your decisions against? Do we have any volunteers to go first? Amy.
My pleasure. I've spent my life working with children and families. It's funny you should ask that question, because what I have said to everybody I speak to is that I will always make my decisions in the best interest of children. So that's my first thing. If we do things in the best interest of our children and grandchildren, we're probably going to make better decisions. So that's my first value. My second value is that everybody deserves a home, whether you are clean and sober, whether you're not, regardless. Housing first is the answer to, it sounds too simplistic, but it's the answer to many of our issues when it comes to businesses being upset with the homeless camps in the back that cost $300,000 to clean, the medical care that we spend at emergency rooms. So dealing with the homeless situation, which any of us in this room could be in if we weren't so lucky. Please remember that. Homeless people are not anything other than who we are, with bad luck. Often there's bad choices, but even with bad choices, I'm sure there's people in this room who have made very bad choices and continue to, but if you have a home, you hide it well. So that's the second issue. And my third issue would be the environment, and the planet is warming, period. I keep getting people saying, well, no, not really. Well, it is, and we have to deal with it. And locally, we have a lot of great things we can do, because locally we've got issues of fossil fuel industry and wanting to create more jobs that are in the renewable energy fields. So those are my 3 basic issues.
Thank you, Amy. Todd?
I got this question a few times, and when I ran a couple years ago, one of my main motives for running, excuse me, was to get people to think about what do we want our community to look like in 20 years? What do we want to save now? What do we want to plan for? And most issues that come our way, I want to take that 20-year timeline. How can we protect what we have? How can we keep this place somewhere people want to keep locating in because of the beautiful amenities we have here? Another thing is, if I actually answered this way before, is like, I believe in data and I believe in facts, and I want to see evidence when we're talking about trying to find solutions to problems. And I'm firmly committed. That's one of the things that I'm really thrilled about governing, is being able to solve problems objectively. And I also think, as maybe a third value, it's telling the truth, and particularly like a lot of things that Amy was just talking about. These cost money, they cost revenues, and you don't want candidates running campaigns who attack people who actually try to say, we need these revenues. We need revenues to fund our drug court. We need revenues to fund incarceration reduction and prevention. And I'm not going to attack my opponent for taking those stands.
Thank you, Todd. Phil, would you like to start?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Well, I'm interested in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And with some of the restrictions that are going on, that makes it difficult. Also, I'm interested in family wage jobs. And to that point, I'm interested in sustaining the existing farms without impeding regulations, and sustaining the refineries for which I worked for many, many years at Mobile Refinery as their chief electrical engineer. So that's very dear and near to me, and they do wonderful things. So life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, family wage jobs, and sustaining existing industry and people that are working for the community.
Thank you, Phil. Red.
So, in the political context, my first loyalty and focus is on democracy itself. I share a lot of Todd's concerns about where we're going. It's 800 years ago we had the Magna Carta was signed, which is really the first start of democracy. This is 70 years ago when we saw the world almost tear itself apart over the issue of who should control whom. I look at the landscape and I share a lot of Todd's concerns about just the corrosive weakening of the democratic institutions that is really the fundamental underpinning of everything else we have. I'm concerned about fairness. I'm concerned about fairness under law for things like, sexual orientation or disability or intellect. I'm concerned about fairness in terms of, a woman's right to choose, for example. I'm concerned about equal opportunity, whether it's access to healthcare or education or employment. I want us to see people who live here, people who live everywhere, should have an opportunity to have shelter. They should have an opportunity to have the ability to support themselves and their families. I despair at the erosion of the middle class. One of the reasons I'm doing this, one of the reasons I can't think of a better use of my life at this point in time, is to try and reverse all those negative trends.
Thank you, Red. So you've all been campaigning for a number of months now. What are the major issues that your district is facing? What are you hearing from your constituents? Phil, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, I'll do that. As you might suspect, I'm very closely tied to my past, having been a worker at a refinery, knowing how well they do things. And as a kid, as an orphan, I worked on lots of farms, and I shoveled a lot of you-know-what. So I know how farms work, and I know how to milk a cow. So those, in my campaign and dealing with the campaign, the top issues are to maintain those farming businesses and the refineries, because they're family wage jobs, and they do things right, and they have for decades. So, of course, shelter and ability to build a home. But if you can't build a home, you can't attract good industry. So those are my concerns.
Fred?
Well, there's the local issues which we've all been accustomed to, but increasingly now we're having to take on the role of a more aggressive role on dealing with federal issues. But the local issues seem to boil down to family wage jobs, affordable housing would be at the top of my list. Environmental issues, such as the issue with Lake Whatcom. People who are experiencing homelessness. It's a growing issue and a demonstration of the further erosion of access to equal opportunity. And I'm particularly concerned on that one with youth. One of the things that I've learnt recently is that if you're a homeless youth, you often leave home without the documents necessary to establish yourself under law. If you can't create an identity for yourself, which simply means a state ID card and a social security number, you are denied access to everything, absolutely everything in the world, with the one exception of education. Is the one area in the society we don't require identification, fortunately. The jail is a big issue. It's our criminal justice system, but the existing jail is, it's inhumane. 40 women share one bathroom. The issue that Phil brought up about refinery jobs, there's got to be a balance between maintaining the refinery jobs and protecting the community in terms of the transportation of crude oil through the community. And I'm about to get the hook. There's more.
Thank you, Red. Amy, would you like to start?
Okay. The jail. That's the biggest issue that we have to deal with in the next 2 weeks. If we pass this jail tax, then that's the last of our discretionary public safety money for 30 years. That's it. Nothing else. That's insane. What we have done is everything backwards. We have put something on the ballot that makes no sense to put on it because we spent, I think, about $150,000 on the Vera Institute, which assessed how do we get people out of jail. And unfortunately, somehow it got on the ballot. The majority of the council decided that it's okay to put it on the ballot and let the voters decide. The voters shouldn't have to be the ones to decide this. We should not have even put it on the ballot. The jail is filled with people who shouldn't be there. 41% of the people are in jail because their bail is $1,000 or less and they can't afford it. There are most other counties in this state have a no cash bail policy. Our prosecutor has decided that's not acceptable, which is why we have so many people sitting in jail. So what we need to do, we can't pass that jail tax. We can't. If we do that, it's going to bankrupt the county. It's going to put people in jail because you can't have a big jail and not fill it. You have to fill it, and that's what the Vera Institute said. So that's my biggest current issue, and we can look 20 years down the road, but we won't have money 20 years down the road if we do this project. We're going to bankrupt ourselves. So I say no to the jail, no to the place it's at. We have to fix the old jail, and we should have done it years ago.
Thank you, Amy. Todd.
Okay. Well, I'll answer the question as you asked it. It was what we're hearing, not necessarily what I think my personal issue is, but I hope we can come back to the jail. I think I've knocked on 4,000 doors. I'm looking at my campaign manager, maybe more than that. And there really isn't a single overriding issue that I'm hearing people talking about. Jobs, I have people ask me about deer several times because I've had 2 people ask me about bears and my policy on bears. Do I have kids? They want to know if I have kids. They ask about schools. I mean, I think it's more that, we are leading, going out there and talking to people. We hear what their concerns are, and then we present to them, like, here's why I'm running. Like, I'm running to protect water quality. Here's why I'm running because, as a person trying to govern, we've been dealt this wild card of the Hearst decision. There are actually people, even in the city, I think I do get a few people bringing up the Hearst issue. The homelessness one is really interesting because I mean, we understand the problem up here, but I get a lot of hostility to homeless people, depending which doors I'm going to. And people saying that they want to leave town because there's too many homeless people. I get people talking about where that shelter might be put or not put, but there's really not a single overriding issue that I'm hearing from folks. It's a wide, diverse, and sometimes funny set of things people want to talk about. Cats. We talk about, you're at your door, you're talking about their cats. But.
Thank you, Todd. So each of you have brought up many different issues that you've heard from people that you care about. Which one are you most excited to tackle in your term? And how would you bring leadership to that issue? So let's see,
I haven't gone first yet.
Okay, Todd, you go first. Thank you.
Which one would be most excited to solve? I would be really excited if we could just solve the Hearst thing and make it go away. I'm not saying that's something I'm really excited to try to tackle, but that's, as far as the issues in the less than 2 years I've been on council have been thrown at us, is the biggest wild card, one of the most complex things. And it's got so many moving parts. It requires, as I'm sure we'll talk more about, getting something from the legislature so we can do some kind of mitigation or conservation thing. I actually, I think the Hearst decision is good law, and it's an important thing to recognize that it makes us think about we are out of water in some basins certain time of the year. We can't just keep allowing people to take water that they don't have rights to. That said, I was one of the people on council trying to figure out, how can we just issue permits to people who've got their projects started, who are hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in there? What can we do? And on legal advice, we're being told, don't do anything or you're going to get us even in more trouble. So, I mean, if we could figure out, we have to do some stuff here locally. We got to start metering. We got to start getting people to agree that we have to count how much water they're taking. We have to push conservation strategies. But even if we're doing that, we still have this whole complex thing that we have to have Olympia helping us out with state solutions, changes in state law that give us the capacity to further solve the problem. And the problem is mostly it's recognizing we don't have enough water some months out of the year.
Thank you, Todd. Amy?
I agree 100% with my opponent. So I'll talk about a different issue, even though I do agree that the Hearst decision is paramount to our county. And the water issue, we have first rights issues, and we have to respect those first rights and the Lummi Nation treaty rights we have. I'll talk about the homelessness issue as being paramount because that's one of the major things that people did talk to me about, because when people are homeless, they're hanging out in front of doorsteps of businesses, they're using the backs of people's yards to sleep, they're going to the bathroom outside, they're doing a whole lot of things that are making the community feel very uncomfortable. And we need to separate that out from the people who are actually criminals. So what I would like to see have happen is we've got about 55 to 70% of our county's budget goes to law and order projects. About less than 1% goes to alternatives to incarceration. With that said, I think what we need to do is we need to shift some of that money to actually build homes. So I do know where I want the money to come from. I want it to come from that bloated budget to build homes and build services, because those two things will actually make us safer. Not putting people through a revolving door of a jail. What will make us safer is having people in a home, so when the police pick someone up, they can bring them home instead of to the ER, which costs us, or to jail, which costs us at least $108 a day. That's stupid.
Okay, I think last time Phil got to go first, so Red, would you mind?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm excited to tackle them all. Really am. I like large, complex problems. I like the intellectual stimulation of this job. I like the almost, to me, it's almost how do I say this? It's almost a spiritual commitment to me to be involved in trying to be part of the solution and building a community as opposed to being one of those on the team that's trying to destroy it because of personal gain. I like sitting in a room where there's conflict and trying to find the common ground between different people in the community and working through and saying, okay, if I hear what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, it looks like 90% of what both sides want is the same. So let's work on the 10%, now that we've agreed that most of what we want is the same. I like the complexity of local government. I ran a business that was half the revenue and half the number of people of the county government. And I thought, well, I'm pretty well prepared. County government is 50 times more complex than the business I ran. It's so diverse. It's so interesting. The problems are what stimulate me and keep me involved and make me want to continue to serve.
Phil.
Would you repeat the question so I know that everybody knows what's...
Yes, let me find my question. I think, yes. Out of all of the issues that we've discussed today and that you're hearing about, which one are you most excited to tackle, and how would you bring your leadership to that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say vote for me and I'll fix the problem. But number two, I don't think I can be whittled down to one item. I think I'll be working on all the problems. None are more important than the other in my estimation. Jobs, industry, I think they're all important for me, and I think I've got guts enough to do it.
Thank you, Phil. So let's dive into some of those issues that you've all mentioned. Some of you have already brought up the jail and talked about it, and that is the issue on the ballot for us this year to vote for. So would you please tell us whether you think we need a new jail or not, and what your thoughts and ideas are about solutions for our community? Who hasn't gone first? Has everybody had a chance to go first yet? Okay, Todd, it looks like you're eager.
Yep, I got my timer here. Yeah, I voted against putting the jail proposal on the ballot because I think we're risking it failing again because it's basically the same proposal as last time. It's too big, it's too far away. It's maybe a better proposal than a couple years ago, but I think we really need to keep the size small so that we are continuing to incentivize incarceration reduction and prevention. I would like to explore investing in the current facility. We need a better facility and we need to spend money. We're going to have to spend a lot of money no matter what. But I don't like this proposal. One of my main worries about it going on the ballot is we are going to have to convince the voters that we need to spend money. When you keep going to the voters and offering the same kind of mistaken ideas, they're going to get fixed into just saying no to everything. So I wish we'd really waited. But I also wish that we really are honest about this. My opponent is posting videos saying that we can just fix this for $4 million. Why not just repair the existing facility for $4 million? It's going to cost $40 million to fix that existing facility. And by putting that kind of information out there, it's going to make it's damaging to our efforts to ever get anything done by promising these feel-good solutions that are based on fake numbers.
Amy. Guess I got to defend myself. I never said that. I shared a video that a gentleman made who was very much against the jail. His name is Robert Lieb, and his son killed himself after being in the jail, and once he got out, he couldn't find a job, he couldn't find a place to live, and he killed himself. And Mr. Lieb has been sending videos around because he's very much against the jail. And in the video, he said it would take $4 million to fix the old jail. I never said that. I know it would cost a lot more to fix it if we keep it. There is, in the brochure that was sent out by the We Want the Jail, it said to put temporary fixes on the jail to keep it okay till a new jail was built would cost $4 million. Actually, it said $3.5 million. But I know that it would cost more than that. So I never said any of that. I just shared a video by a gentleman whose son killed himself. And that was the reason why I shared it, because everything else in the video was very good and very important. This jail can't be built. This jail shouldn't be built. It shouldn't be built in Ferndale on a piece of property that was bought for almost $6 million when it was only assessed at 1.7. It shouldn't be built in Ferndale because now it would sit next to Homeland Security property that our executor sold to Homeland Security for $4.5 million, which sits next to the airport, which could be a Homeland Security detention center if everybody had their way in our government. Not the council, of course, but the county executor, the prosecutor, and the sheriff. So I say no to the jail now.
Okay. Phil, I think, can go first this time.
Well, I'm taking a big risk. I agree with Todd. That's a risk, you know. But anyway, I think that the existing jail, to fix that is very impractical, and we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of worry on that new jail. Anyway, Debbie is here, and she's lived down there. They probably would have to get rid of her office for a while to remodel that facility down there. And so I think the money should be spent more wisely on a new facility, something similar to what Skagit has passed. And we need a new jail.
Thank you, Phil. Brad?
So we do need a new jail. There's a lot of misinformation that's been about this topic, and one of the key ones is I think there's common agreement that everybody wants less incarceration, a more humane environment, mental and substance abuse. They want to separate treatment in the facility. They want to separate young offenders from sexual offenders, or people who've got active TB from the rest of the population. But there's a lot of misinformation, and I have to challenge a couple of points here. 41% of people in jail are not there because they can't pay a bond of $1,000 or less, as Ms. Glasser just said. And one of the previous forums, you said that we were going to spend $20 million on mitigation.
I meant 10, sorry.
Well, the number's 700K. And this constant thing of bringing up the fact that Jack Lowes sold a piece of property to Homeland Security before he was county executive. And I don't understand the connection between that. He doesn't profit from the purchase of this. And that's the sort of thing that concerns me is people bring these issues up and they throw them up as red flags and smoking guns, and the dots don't connect to each other. So we have to do something with the jail. If the jail thing doesn't pass, we have no money to do incarceration prevention programs beyond our existing funding. And if we renovate the existing jail and spend $40 million to do it, we end up with a brand new 1970s jail with no additional capacity.
Thank you, everyone. So as a follow-up question, we do have, the Vera Institute has come and done reports now on who is in our jail and why, and they have shown that there are a lot of people that have substance abuse issues that end up in our jail, that have mental illness that end up in our jail. So I'm curious, what do you guys think needs to be done by our county to address our substance abuse rates and our community members experiencing mental health crisis? Amy, would you like to go first?
Okay. This has been my occupation for almost 40 years. So in my opinion, what I think we should do is we should be diverting some of our law and order money to substance abuse and mental health programs and homes throughout the county. We have been spending, at least since I've been here, everybody says, well, we got to have the shelter in Bellingham. We have to have services in Bellingham. We have to have the housing in Bellingham because that's where everything is. That's a cycle that we need to stop. Linden has homeless, Linden has mentally ill, Linden has all of the same problems that Bellingham has, as does Ferndale and Blaine and out in the county. So my proposal is that we have outreach centers that are, again, small little facilities connected with tiny homes that allow people to, like me, to go to these communities and provide services. People won't come in from Maple Falls to get their substance abuse care. But if I went out there, and I would if I had a place to go meet people, but I can't afford to go and rent an office in all of these cities. So if the county and the city provided a small building, and again, I see the money coming from our bloated law and order budget, to provide those services in the community will divert a lot of those people from jail and from the incarceration issue and from the hospital and from everything else that costs us so much.
Todd?
I respond? When I started my opening, I was talking about the politics of just saying stuff that feels good. I mean, that all sounds good, but it's going to cost tens of millions of dollars, and it's going to take a lot of time. There might be a role for the tiny houses, but we really got to be honest about where are we going to buy the land? Where are we going to put these? How are we going to pay for these? Which parts of the law and order budget are we just going to say that's bloated and that we're going to cut? To answer your question, we need to invest more in triage. We are investing in a triage facility. We need to invest more in mental health and behavioral health services. We need to incentivize the county doing more home detention, some of the programs that the city is doing to keep people out of jail. We also have to recognize that a lot of the stuff that even the Vera Institute report is suggesting, we can't control as a county council. It's the prosecutor's office, it's the courts. That's where we have to make reforms on the bail system, but we're working on that. And we are working on that. And my opponent is sending out mail saying that I want to raise your property taxes before we do anything like that. And that, how can we afford Todd Donovan? Because he wants to do your taxes before he's going to do any of these diversion programs. We're working on that stuff, Amy. We're putting a lot of time into that. And I'm being realistic about this. And I also ask you, that video that you're talking about, this is, we need to be responsible for things. That was your major donor. That was your campaign website. And you're just saying, oops. I think to solve any of these problems, we really just have to be serious.
Red?
So everybody agrees that we have to do more to reduce incarceration rates and recidivism, and that requires programs outside the jail for people who can seek help before they get into trouble. It also requires help for people who've gone through the criminal justice system and need help afterwards. But the thing that we keep forgetting is it also requires programs inside the jail, and the existing jail has no space whatsoever. I mean, you've got one toilet stall for 40 women because there's no space to do anything. There's not even space to put a toilet in there for women. There's no AA or NA meetings in the jail. If you've got a mental health problem or you think you've got a substance abuse problem and you want to have help while you're in the jail, you'll stand there talking through the food slot of the door to your counsellor because there's nowhere else to do it, and you'll be doing it standing in front of 8 other people in your cell if you're lucky. We have to provide things like the triage centre that Todd talked about. The county, by the way, everybody says, well, the county needs to do more on recidivism and incarceration prevention. Absolutely true, but we also need to acknowledge that we are already funding 25 different programs that reduce incarceration rates and substance abuse and mental health issues. If we don't build the new jail, if we do build the new jail, we will have 36 beds that are dedicated to mental health and substance abuse programs, treatment, and we'll have room for AA meetings, NA meetings, counselling, etc.
Thank you, Red. Phil?
Again, I'm in danger of agreeing with some of my opponents. Well, they're not my opponents, they're my friends. But incarceration for criminal acts and health concerns are two different items. I think we should carefully listen to what Bill Elfo says he needs. He's put out several papers saying what he needs. Perhaps follow the plan of the Skagit that is passed just not too long ago. We need a new jail. We need to be able to help people with health problems. But the two are two different things. And yes, I agree, we need a triage system too, to separate the criminal behavior from health behaviors, although perhaps criminals have a health problem, mental health problem, but we need to separate the two. So I believe that Bill Elfo has told us what he needs.
Thank you, Phil. So I have a list of 10 more questions I could ask, and I know that there are hundreds of issues that we all care about, but I want to make sure that the audience has time to ask questions that are on your mind. So I think we have Dawn and Chuck that will be roving. So if you have anything that you would like to ask our candidates, please raise your hand. I see one right now in the front.
I understand that at this point, the juvenile detention center on the top floor of the jail that has a very significantly reduced census and is at times even empty. And that top floor of the jail presents an opportunity for quite a bit of space. The emptiness is, and the drop in census is because of the prevention programs that have been put in place, and a wide variety of them. So what would you suggest we do with that space on the top floor of the jail?
How about if we start with Phil?
Oh. Well, since I agree that we have to completely remodel the jail and the building itself, because it's not just the jail, it's the whole building. So we have to create something for that detention center while we're remodeling the building, which is practically, which is impossible. So for the juvenile section, I believe we need a separate facility. That should come out of our tax. I believe there are funds available for health problems in the county anyway. So I believe that's a separate item, but if we're going to remodel the building, and we shouldn't, that would probably be eliminated at least temporarily anyway.
If it keeps going, I'll address that. Red, would you like to go?
So, I think an interesting question, and I'll be perfectly frank, I haven't given that one a lot of thought. I will say, I think the juvenile facility is on top of the courthouse and not on top of the jail, and the jail is a separate building next to it. But that, nonetheless, it's still worthy of consideration. The challenge I have is that we have to keep the juveniles separated from the adults, and it's a dual-sex facility, male-female facility. And I think, yeah, by the way, I think it's a good story, because if the history of that was back in, I think, the 90s, the forecast was that the county would need, within 10 years, would need capacity for 85 juveniles. And they started looking at building a new facility. And then the state sort of said, no, hang on, this is just completely wrong. We need to do more to stop people entering the system in the first place. And it was stunningly successful. I mean, you know, we should have a facility for 200 juveniles based on the way we used to do things in the 90s, early 90s. And it's not empty, but its current capacity is 32 juveniles, and I think the highest it's been in the last 12 months is 12, and the average population is closer to 8. So that, to me, gives me great hope that there are things that we can do to reduce incarceration and prevent recidivism.
I haven't given that a lot of thought either, but just as I'm sitting here, I'm wondering if that facility, that space could be used as a sheriff's space on that floor, and then move the kids to perhaps cut off a wing over at Division Street, which is never full. So the downtown jail is always full, and always being told that we need to make it smaller and we need to fix it. Well, we haven't fixed it, and it's been a lot of years, and the finger pointing as to who's responsible for not fixing it is a whole bunch of this. So I think that if we build a new jail, the theory is we're going to get rid of the Division Street jail, which we just bought. We just built a few years ago. And then we'll destroy the old jail that we have to renovate enough to keep people safe till a new jail is built. Then they want to destroy the old jail that they renovated to make it safe and build a Sallyport, which is like a mini jail for people who are going in and out of court. If that sounds practical, logical, and a good use of our tax dollars, then vote for people who want the jail and don't vote for me, because I don't know how that could possibly be a good idea for our county. So I think we could maybe use that floor if it's, honestly have never seen it. So if that could be used for sheriff's quarters and make the basement maybe for the quiet place for people who need quiet when they're in jail, the people who have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, people who have special medical issues. So maybe we could make the downstairs more of the quiet place so that when people need to be isolated, they're not on the first floor where it's the administration and it's noisy.
Thank you, Amy. Todd?
Yeah, thanks. I guess that is some. None of us have really considered that. That's a great question, Judy. I'll echo something Rudd said, that we had this amazing presentation a few months ago where we had that discussion about there was originally somebody, there was a movement to fund a large juvenile facility that we just don't need. And it's the fact that we don't need it and there's single-digit people in there is testimony to the fact that these programs, these alternatives to incarceration, these intervention programs work, and that we should be investing in those things. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to put the jail tax on the ballot. I want to pursue those sorts of policies. But I think, whatever we do, we're going to need a very small juvenile facility that has to be separate from the jail. And the farther away it is from the jail, I think it's better for the kids who are in there.
Thank you, Todd. Do we have any other audience questions? Oh, thank you, Don.
Well, I've been reading about the jail recently, and one of the things about the tax is that there was a tax passed in 2004 that didn't go to a jail, but I am kind of curious, well, what did it go to then? Has it just been more law enforcement or what?
Operating the jail, and that's, a big hunk of what this tax is going to be is its operations. It's not just capital, it's operations. And other people might know this one better than me, but it was hard. If you go back and look at the ballot statement on that one, it's hard to figure out what it was actually funding. A jail facility and public safety operations. But I think some of that money went to build the Division Street facility.
I'm actually trying to look up now.
So I think there was a disconnect between how the vote was presented and where the money was going. And I think we're doing a little bit better on this one that I, again, didn't want to put on the ballot, but we got to recognize that a big hunk of that money is the operations. It's not just the capital.
Amy?
Thank you. Here's the pie chart of where the money went. So out of 31.7 million, jail operations 16.9, daybed jail credit to cities 6 million, the new minimum security on Division Street 2.4 million, new jail project, I think that's holding off for whatever project, 2.8, and upgrades to the existing jail 3.5 million. So that's where the tax has gone. The new tax that's not going to be on the ballot has similar wording. It's a public safety tax and a jail use tax. So it's both, and it could be used for anything. And anything, we have found, means anything. So again, I don't think it makes any sense whatsoever when that last jail tax was supposed to build a proper facility. Well, the proper facility it built, the proposal now is to get rid of that proper facility and build another bigger jail. So that's where it goes, and if anybody is interested, I can leave this up on the front if anybody wants to take a look at it.
Thank you, Amy. Rudd?
So I do agree with you on your numbers. They're the same ones I've got on my phone. What I don't agree with is the earlier comment, by the way, that the Division Street is never full. Division Street, we frequently have to ship people to Yakima because the combined current facilities are not adequate. And part of the reason for understanding that is because you have to separate people in the jail. You can't just lump everybody into the same room. You've got to separate by gender, you've got to separate by age, you've got to separate by whether someone's carrying an infectious disease, you've got to separate youth from offenders, you want to separate youth from gang members. The Division Street facility is frankly, it's as horrible as the downtown jail. If you go in there, and I don't know whether, I don't know which of the members up here have been there. I've been to both the jail here, the Division Street facility, and I've been to the Skagit facility. The Division Street facility is incredibly noisy. It has capacity for 30 people in a room. Recently there was a guy who was pulled back behind the cameras and was beaten up so badly he lost his spleen, had other serious injuries, and they couldn't even see it. The noise is so loud in the building because of the smoke evacuation system, which is basically just a big gap above the ceiling, that it drives the staff and the inmates nuts because it's just so loud. So,
Phil?
Well, I had the same concern, too. I think that we've had plans and talk and so forth about, I think the money should have been placed in a kitty where it could have been applied to the new jail. So I think the money was probably spent frivolously. There are a lot of people that may disagree with me, but the money was there and it should have been spent for what it was made for.
One of the issues I hear about all the time relating to economic development is the need for more affordable housing, and I haven't heard much about what you guys think we can do to try to improve the level of affordable housing to drive more economic development.
Housing is a complex question because there's a number of things driving it. The price pressure from Vancouver and Seattle has got more to do in many ways with the fact that we've got foreign investors are looking at places to put their money out of their own countries, and they're buying up houses and they're leaving them vacant. Vancouver has 10,000 houses now that are vacant, that have been bought up by foreign buyers. And it's one thing for a foreign buyer to buy a house and then rent it out. That doesn't change the housing stock, but when you buy up the houses and then you don't rent it out, it creates a real problem. That pressure is, while there's not a lot of foreign investment in Bellingham, what there is the people are going to Seattle. The price of a house in Seattle's basically doubled in the last, I think, 10 years. And those people are selling their houses and saying, oh, you can move to Bellingham. And they're pushing up the prices here. The other thing that's happened is when the Great Recession hit, you saw a loss of people in the construction industry and you saw a significant loss of people entering the construction trades. So when the recession turned around, there's been a significant labour shortage. What does that translate into? It translates into higher construction prices, which are currently growing at about 5% per annum. So all these things combined with the fact that there's this constant relentless pressure to drive down the income of the bottom 90% of the population. The affordability is just becoming a problem. The county can do some stuff, but not a lot. Sorry, I got the bell.
Thank you, Red.
I'm passionate about this.
Phil, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. Yeah, you can't, well, if you listen to Dan Robbins, who's running for Port, he can tell you that there have been a couple of companies that have wonderful family wage jobs that came and looked for a place for their employees to work, to live. They couldn't find it. And why? There are a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is the moratorium on building. Taxes is another reason due to the moratorium and not being able to build in the county. Where do the taxes go that those plots would have paid? It goes to you and me, and that's a miserable situation. But in order to attract business, you've got to have a place to for your employees to live, and a moratorium on building is not going to do that. So you've got to do something about having people to be able to build a home or drill a well.
Thank you, Phil. Todd?
Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. And I'll kind of pick off where Red was leaving off there. What can the county do here in terms of housing affordability? And I'll leave the homelessness issue as a second. These are overlapping, but the middle class people being able to buy housing. I guess my question is, can we build our way out of this? That, we could try to get the cities to expand their urban growth areas. The cities might look at that as something where if they expand their urban growth areas, we're going to allow for more housing construction, but it might be a net fiscal loss to the city to actually supply the infrastructure out there, let alone whatever questions a sprawl might be involved with this. So how do we figure that out so it's actually fiscally viable for the cities to do that if we want to do that? But the other part of that is, people want to live here, and this is one of the dilemmas, that the better we do keeping this a really desirable place, the more people want to locate here. So that demand is going to keep going. Can we build our way to keep pace with that demand and increase supply that's actually going to lower the price of housing? And that, looking at some of the proposals that people have brought before council, they're talking about, if you expand the UJ out over here, we're going to build these beautiful houses. They're going to be $500,000 homes. They're going to be awesome. That, that's not solving the housing affordability issue. So, but a lot of it is going to come down to, how do we figure out who's going to pay for that new growth if that's what we want to do?
Thank you, Todd. Amy?
I'm going to try to come up with some solutions. We know it's a problem. We know we don't have enough affordable housing. We know that people on fixed incomes don't have good housing, and they're at risk every month for their rent going up to be homeless. I think one thing we can do, which is what Canada did, is put a fee on people from out of the country investing. And I think maybe we as a county can do the same thing. So if there are foreign investors, a certain fee gets put onto property they buy, and that goes into a fund for affordable housing. We can also do something with builders, that over a certain amount, if the home is worth more than $400,000 or so, and I'm not sticking with that number particularly, but a fairly high number, that 1% goes into a housing fund. What we could do is we could work more with our economic development money, with the Colshan Land Trust and Habitat for Humanity, and see if we can work on getting investment banks here to provide loans for low-income people to be building homes that are basically $1 per square foot. If we get the county and we work to change some of the building codes out there, not necessarily where we need a well, but if we can change the codes to let smaller footprint homes be built, such as 250 square foot homes where the bathroom might not be to the code of what it says it has to be in terms of size, we can maybe build more houses that way. What we need to do is we need to accept that fixed income people will need housing, and the best thing we can do is provide it with them where they can maybe even own the home eventually.
Touched on this when you mentioned speculation in real property and how that pushes up prices, and Amy mentioned the suggestion I'm going to make. The Colshan Community Land Trust is in the business of taking real property out of the speculative market, and therefore helping to stop that inflationary spiral that housing speculation causes. Can any of you propose an idea that the council might be able to put forward to help organizations such as the Land Trust remove housing from the speculative market so that we're not just paying for the increase in the price of dirt all the time?
The county does not have is not a land bank, so we don't have land per se that would be useful for that purpose. It's a really challenging question because you've got to find the capital that's willing to be that patient and accept that level of return. That's been done, if I remember correctly, through donations. And I think, there's the Bellingham Home Fund, which also provided a tax revenue to provide stuff like that. I don't have an easy path forward to that goal. I do, however, think that what we can do here is we can increase the supply of ADUs and detached accessory dwelling units in homes. And while I disagree that the law would allow us to put a fee on foreign buyers if they buy a house, I don't think that would be allowed under the Constitution. I do believe, because we currently do it, we can put restrictions that if you build an accessory dwelling unit, at the moment you have to live in one of the two dwellings in order to do that. So if we promoted a program where we could do that in the urban areas and the rural areas, you could say if you're living in one of the properties, you don't have any additional fees to pay, for example. But if you're going to buy that property for investment and build a second dwelling unit, then you have to pay a fee, and that would be an impact fee of some sort.
Thank you, Red. Phil, would you like to answer?
Well, my answer would be, my name is Phil, incidentally, and excuse me, I'm against infill. And if you build in the city and you build apartments that are very much likened by the city, you can pull in a lot of people that can have homes. Albeit it would be very expensive, but again, to me, it comes back to the concept of moratoriums. They remove some of the moratoriums and some of the regulations and permitting, and I think the building for homes would, and the ability to get homes. I'm not too acquainted with land bank or anything like that, but I'm very much acquainted with the ability to need a home, the
Thank you, Phil.
moratoriums and permits.
Amy?
Okay. That question is so relevant. John Moon and I were just talking prior to me coming up here, and we were talking about beneficial bank, which is banks that their profits go to benefit certain environmental or women's groups or different kinds of charities and good things. That bank's down in California, and a bank like that, if we can encourage them, actually there's one in Seattle, if we can encourage them to come up to Bellingham and do some work with Colshan Land Trust and Habitat for Humanity to actually provide the loans for people on low income with very low fees or no fees to the Land Trust and to Habitat, then I think we can get some people into homes that way. And I think the idea of having a local bank, I know that the idea of having actually a public bank is not very realistic right now, but the idea of working with a beneficial bank with B corporations, I think, would be one way to manage that issue.
Todd.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work that Colshan Community Land Trust does on this. Again, the county has land use jurisdiction outside of the urban areas, so there's a question of how much do we want to be trying to do something like getting that land we could put the housing on. A, how could we do that? How would we pay for it? B, do we want to be doing that in areas outside of the urban areas? I mean, if we did want to go that way, we'd be talking about then the county probably purchasing land. So how would we come up with the funds for that? If people want to maybe explore that, we'd look at the state law and see, can the county ask voters to pass a tax similar to what the city asked voters to pass, to come up with funds to buy land like that. And I won't claim to say that I even know what the state law says on that, but that, I mean, those would be the things we'd have to be asking about to do something like what you're talking about. But there, I forgot earlier, there are things the county is doing. Like we pursue grants and we use general funds to have a program for rental assistance. It's nowhere near enough, but programs like that, incentivizing somehow developers to have a broader type of housing stock that has more affordable units. But again, these are things that are really usually going on inside of the urban areas where we don't have the land use jurisdiction.
I want to say a sincere thank you to each of you for running. I've watched the process, and it is grueling and exhausting and like the worst interview process that I could ever imagine. So all of our gratitude to each of you for putting yourselves through that, for being here today. I really feel like we are a very fortunate community to have candidates of this caliber even want to volunteer to run. So thank you. Thanks for your answers, for your time, and a big round of applause for our guests.
Right, first 15.
So your mic?
But what about
But not this time.
screen?